That's what you want. That hard crust that's just delicious. All right, Not Your Mama's Pasta, back with another Not Your Mama's instructional video. I figured if I'm gonna talk about my principles to sourdough starter, I should give a video on how to make one of my favorite breads in the whole world. And it's something that is not that difficult to do at home in your own, standard oven, especially if you have a convection oven, but any, standard oven will do. And that is making Pane di Matera, which is a very rustic Southern Italian sourdough, that has a very hard crust, and because of the wheat, it has a unique flavor and texture, and it's just incredible. So before I get into it, I'll talk about why I love this so much, and mainly because it's from the region that my ancestors are from, Basilicata, which is a very kind of hot, poor Southern Italian region between Calabria and Puglia, the toe and the heel of the boot. Matera is this kind of lost, or Basilicata is this lost region way down south, and people mainly only know about it because of Matera, which is this ancient town where people were living in caves until the 1950s, and this bread was literally baked into that town. Get it? But it's just that the town is known for its breads because it's such a poor town. That's what's great about this bread is the durum wheat they grow down there is native to southern Italy, and it's a heritage durum wheat called Senatore Capelli. They just call it Capelli durum wheat, and it's this ancient grain of durum that grows really well in that hot, dry climate all over Basilicata and Puglia. And they actually make a bread in Puglia called Pane di Altamura, and that is the only bread in all of Italy that's protected through that European PDO standard. It's like very, very special bread, but Pane di Matera is just special to me because of my ancestors. But again, that durum wheat is just this special, very high protein wheat that it tenses up really well when you work with it. So it's perfect for making pastas. That's any pasta you get in the store. The good pastas usually have durum wheat in there. And again, that Capelli durum is just a variety that's native, so seems to have much higher nutritional value, which I feel like is just anything that you're eating that is, native to your area and is cultivated without, chemicals. So the funny thing is, in America, they do grow durum, but durum just loves being miserable. So it grows really well in hot, dry desert environments. So there's desert durum that they'll grow in Southern California and Arizona, but most of the durum in America is actually grown in North Dakota. So it just loves cold, miserable climates too. And it's mainly just because they have much milder summers and not a lot of rain. So it's just durum just really likes that environment. So there's northern durum and then there's southern durum, desert durum. So almost all the durum in the U.S. is grown in North Dakota with some in Southern California and Arizona. The southern probably being similar to that dry, hot climate of Basilicata and Puglia in Italy. So what I have here is actually a North Dakota durum, but it works just as well. And it's finely ground. So durum is typically made into semolina flour. That's what you typically see in the grocery store. If you can't get this fine durum flour, just use half semolina and half bread flour and it'll turn out just as well. But this is a finely ground durum flour that I'm getting. It's an organic flour. It's really high quality durum. And when you talk about making sourdough, you usually talk about hydration percentage. So hydration percentage is like, okay, if you're making a bread out of 1,000 grams of flour, and that flour likes a hydration percentage of say 70%, then you would start with 1,000 grams of flour, 700 grams of water, And then for that amount, you would use 250 grams of starter and 25 grams of salt. You can adjust the salt as much as you want. Lievito madre sourdough starter, that's about what you want for that. Typically, those sourdough bowls that you see people make in the Dutch oven that people make at home, when you cut the little slits into it and it makes this beautiful round sourdough bowl, those are usually 500 grams of flour. So this is actually going to be 650 grams. These are bigger. It's this very unique shape with this hard crust, and it just, again, this golden wheat, it's literally the gold standard of Southern Italy, and it just gives a nice texture and flavor to this bread. So I'm going to start with 650 grams of this finely ground durum flour. Oh, it's 650. What do you know? Who knew? And then I'm going to add, for that amount of flour, I'll add 180 grams of Lievito madre sourdough starter, which I think is a little more than that conversion of 250 to 1,000. I'm not sure. So about 180 grams of Lievito madre. And again, it's very easy to do at home. You can just knead it by hand, or if you have a KitchenAid with a dough hook, it's even better. So because I like to take the easy way out, I'll use a KitchenAid. So just throw it in the KitchenAid dough hook. Typically use setting 2 on the KitchenAid with the dough hook. And right now, I just have that Lievito madre and the flour in the KitchenAid mixing. And then I just slowly add the water. So the problem is if you add the water all at once, it'll pool up and you'll just get this kind of messy, floury, watery pool that will never combine and mix all together. But if you add it slowly, you start to get a dough made that's drier, and then it brings all the flour from the edges together, and then you just keep slowly adding it. Because if you add it all at once, the flour from the edges doesn't get incorporated. But if you add it slowly, it incorporates all the flour nice and gradually, and it mixes it really well. So I'll just keep adding this. And it's that easy. I mean, you start with the flour, the Lievito madre, add the water in, and then after all that, that's when I add the salt. Good rule of thumb is to not let the salt touch the yeast or sourdough starter directly. I don't think it makes much of a difference, but I do it anyway. So there are some sticky bits. This durum flour, this durum wheat is very hard, so it does kind of stick to the edges, so I just have to kind of get it off the edges a little bit to finish mixing in the actual mixer with the dough hook. All right, now all the water's incorporated. Now I'll just add the salt. And like I said, it's about 25 grams to 1,000 grams salt to flour. I like it rather salty, so I'm doing 17 grams for that 650 grams of flour. Now, the hydration percentage for this durum is tricky because it doesn't have that stretchiness like a soft wheat does. Like when you make a panettone, that Manitoba flour is a soft wheat, but it has a lot of protein, so it stretches really, really well, and you can make windows out of the dough. You cannot do that with durum. It has a high percentage of protein, but it tenses up when you knead it. So it's just a much tougher dough, but it does, especially this finely ground durum, takes quite a bit of water. So we're hydrating at 75%. So to 650 grams of flour, I added about 490 grams of water. And that feels pretty good. So I'll just go ahead, now that it's all been incorporated, all the water, we can finish up with the dough hook and just do the rest by hand. So durum loves being worked. And it's pretty much this part of sourdough making, sourdough bread making, is like building muscle. So if you go to the gym, you're not going to lift your bicep every single day. You lift it one day and then let it rest. And that stress plus the rest is what builds the muscle and makes it stronger. The same exact thing with gluten. So you stretch it, stretch it, stretch it, you're putting all this energy into it, and that builds up that gluten, but then the rest helps strengthen it as well. So when you make sourdough, you're strengthening that gluten by kneading it, and then you let it rest. And typically you really, like, there's no knead sourdoughs where you just let it rest, then kind of fold it, then let it rest, then stretch and fold it. that's kind of all you really need to do. But durum, this hard wheat, does like to be kneaded, and it's almost like kneading pasta dough. I mean, you can see it's just much firmer than your typical, sourdough bread would be like. So I just knead it for about, 3 to 5 minutes. That's all you need to do. And I knead it like a pasta. So I kind of get a little cylinder here, stretch it, take it back, stretch it back like that. All right, now it's only been a few minutes, but I can tell it's already starting to tense up on me. So I'm gonna go ahead, put it in the bowl. Then all I do is cover it with a wet paper towel so it doesn't dry out, and just let it rest for, 10, 15 minutes tops. That's really it. And that's enough to let that gluten relax, strengthen, and then you knead it again, or typically just fold and stretch. Just do that a few times before you let it proof overnight. So now this dough ball has rested about 10 minutes and it's already nice and stretchy again. That gluten's relaxed nice. So instead of typically what you would do with sourdough is just a simple stretch and fold, because hard durum wheat likes to get worked, I'm gonna just knead it a little bit more. And then after I let it rest again, all I'll do is the stretch and fold. So this is 10 minutes after that first dough ball, and you can see how much smoother it is. It's just a beautiful, smooth ball already after one resting. And that's what you want. So it's already tensing up again after barely doing anything. So I'm gonna go ahead, put it back. And this is called pirlatura. This little motion right here. The Italians have a name for everything. They have a name for this. Pirlatura is the word for rolling dough into a circle, especially with panettone. So if you ever make panettone, you kind of roll it into this dough ball, put it in that paper mold, throw it in the oven, then hang it upside down. But that's what this is called, and you get a nice, beautiful circular ball by doing the pirlatura. So I'll just let it rest again. And maybe 1 or 2 more times of stretch and folds, and then it'll be ready to proof. All right, now it's been another 10 minutes. The magic of video. So again, it's looking nice and smooth. Oh, it's already beautiful. Okay, so now I'll just do your typical stretch and folds, where you fold all of the edges in on itself. Not too much work here. Little pirlatura. And that's pretty much it. And now I'll just do this one more time for good measure. All right, now I'm gonna do one last stretch and fold. It's rested. I let it rest a little longer this time just because this one I'm gonna stretch out a little bit more. So I want it to be the dough to be a little more relaxed. All these extra stretch and folds probably overkill. All you really probably need to do, throw all the ingredients in your KitchenAid, let it mix in a dough hook or mix it by hand, let it rest, do one resting and stretch and fold just so that it gets that nice smooth texture. But then, that's it, and let it proof overnight. And I'll talk about after this. But I'm just gonna dot it here, and I'm just trying to incorporate some extra air here and kind of make rectangles that I fold onto itself. And just, again, I'm just trying to incorporate a little extra air. I don't know if it makes a big deal, but I think it helps with that nice kind of mesh gluten network that you get when you slice through the bread and look at the cross section. Just makes it look nicer, makes for a better texture. Now the final pirlatura. And that's it. Now you got your dough ready to be proofed. So what I'll do here is put just a little bit, really little bit of olive oil, or any neutral oil would be fine. It doesn't really matter. Coat the inside a little bit. And the hope is that after it's done proofing overnight, it'll just fall right out of the bowl, because once it's proofed, you really don't want to mess with it much. What's gonna happen now is all the little air pockets that are in there will start to expand. The yeast will do its work, it creates all these little air pockets, and you don't wanna destroy those after it's been proofed. Now, we will work it a little bit in the morning, and then we'll let it rise maybe a little bit more depending on the temperature and everything. But that's another thing. So time and temperature, I keep my house very cold. It's about 62 in here. So I will let it rise for at least 12 hours probably. Typically, you know, depending on the temperature, 6 to 12 hours. If you have it in a proofing oven, this would probably be ready in like 3 hours. So you could do this in one day. It's really just time and temperature. So you can do sourdough in just a few hours. If you have it warm enough, it'll rise quickly. But I like to do a slow rise. So just gonna put tin foil on this, and that'll help seal it up better so that it doesn't get any air inside. And just let it rest overnight, and we'll finish it up in the morning. All right, it's the next morning, and I just woke up looking just like this. What do you know? Anyway, so I got my dough here. It's been rising, and I transferred it into a different bowl, which I oiled, but now it's about tripled in size, which is what you want. Mine took about 12 hours at my kitchen temperature, but then I also put it in the oven on proof mode just to get it a little puffier. It wasn't fully risen. You really want it to almost triple in size. That's kind of what it looks like. And the hope is I oiled this bowl pretty well, so hopefully it'll just fall out nice and easy, because we don't want to pull it out. We don't want to mess with it. It's got all these nice, beautiful little air bubbles that have expanded, and we don't want to mess with that nice gluten network. So I'm going to keep this surface pretty well floured. And before I do anything, I'm going to go ahead and turn the oven on. So the baking process is a 4-step. I do 4 steps. So turn the oven on to 485 degrees and put a little pan of water to create a nice steam environment, and cook it at that temperature for 15 minutes. Turn the oven down to 390 for 30 minutes. Then turn it down to 350 for another 15 minutes, still with that water in. And then we take the water out in the last 15 minutes at 300 degrees on convection mode if you have a convection oven, but if not, it's fine. Just take that water pan out. So what I'll first do, preheat the oven to 485, and I'm gonna use a little pan. Doesn't matter what pan you use, any sort of pie pan would work. I'm gonna get this water nice and hot, and I'm gonna put it right in the oven, and we want it to get steaming. Actually, what I might do to hurry this along is put it on the stove. This is a metal pan, so it'll be fine right on the stove. So I'm just gonna fill it with, 1 to 2 inches of water, and that's really all you need. It's not gonna evaporate all out just an hour of baking, but I'm gonna put it right on the stove and get it nice and boiling, so that right when it goes in the oven, it's already steaming nice, it's already at temperature, and it'll keep that nice steam environment in the oven. So right now, preheat the oven. As the oven preheats, we'll take this dough out of the bowl. I'm kind of using my fingers to get it out, but it came out pretty well without too much of that dough stuck to the bottom, so that's perfect. So this is looking good. So right now, I'm gonna get a little bit more flour on my surface, and I want this side to remain kind of wet. I don't want to put too much flour on this side here, because we're going to fold it onto itself. So we kind of want this to stick to itself. Whereas this bottom side here, we do want it to be very, very dry and floured so that it slides pretty easily. So now, like I said, we don't want to mess with it too aggressively. We're just very gently kind of forming a rectangle. And now we're going to form the iconic Pane di Matera shape, very similar to the Pane di Altamura shape. And it's they call it a cornetto, which is what you get in the morning at breakfast. It's like a croissant shape. And so we're pretty much just making what's called a giant cornetto. And we first stretch it out into sort of a rectangle with the edges ovaled up a little bit, but not too thin. That's kind of what you want here. Just kind of a nice rectangular form. Now what I'll do is fold these two edges together into a little triangle. Press it, not too hard. Pull the top of the triangle in and roll it on itself. Now take these corners here, press them in just slightly, not too aggressively. Press, press, fold it one more time, press, 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 and hold it for a second and really let it stick to itself. Now we're gonna turn it around, and now we have this other little rectangle. So we're actually gonna fold these edges up to make kind of a thinner rectangle. Press those down, fold the top of this thinner rectangle in, and now you have this beautiful kind of croissant shape. What they usually do is hit it with their elbow. They actually hit it pretty hard. I'm not that aggressive. I like to be gentle, but you press it in like that, and that kind of helps to kind of fold it onto itself and make that nice kind of half moon croissant shape, that iconic Pane di Matera shape. So now I'm just gonna adjust it a little bit. And once that oven reaches temperature, I'm gonna go ahead and cut some slits on that back side. That's another part that makes this iconic. Again, they press it a little bit so that it does not come apart, but I'll do that again once I make those slits. So the oven is almost at temperature. Once it gets up to temperature, I'm gonna finish making this shape. Right now, that water that I have on the stove is fully boiling. So now, once I put it in the oven, which is already higher than the boiling point, it'll continue to steam very well and create a perfect steam environment for the first few phases of baking this bread. All right, our oven is now up to temperature, so I'll finish shaping this. So now I got this nice cornetto shape. So we just do 3 slits in the back, cutting through both those layers of kind of half moon shape. So 1, 2, 3, not too deep. You just kind of want this bread to open up a little bit of flour. I'm using a pizza peel. What you could do is use a baking sheet. If you don't have a pizza peel, just flip a baking sheet over so it's completely flat, you don't have the edge, and use that and just slide it in and out on that with a little flour. It's pretty easy. I'm also using a pizza stone. So I have the 2 racks kind of lower in the oven with the water rack lower than the stone rack. I have the pizza stone rack over that. And I'm just gonna put the bread right on that pizza stone. Slide it in nice. Pizza stone's heated up. And we're gonna do at 485, just 15 minutes. And at this hottest temperature, it's got that nice steam environment. It'll just put a lot of energy and heat into that, blow it up real nice. Then we turn that heat down, keep that steam environment, and for the next 3 phases, just continue to bake it. All right, so the timer's going off for that first section of baking. So now I'm gonna turn the oven off. I'm gonna open it a little bit just to let some of that heat out, because we're gonna lower the temperature now to regular bake mode, 390. Close it back up, keep that water in there, and now we're gonna bake it for 30 minutes at 390. All right, so the timer just went off, so now we're gonna open it back up, let some of that heat out, and we're gonna lower the temperature now to 350, set it for 15 minutes, and keep that water pan in there for now. And now we just have 30 minutes left. All right, timer's going off. Now we're on to the last phase of baking, so I'll turn it back on to 300 degrees. Now I'm gonna take that water out, and now we're just gonna really harden up that crust. So set the timer, 15 more minutes, and that's it. This will be the last phase of baking. The last 15 minutes are done. We can shut the oven off, take a look at our finished bread. Oh yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful. Look at that. Oh, It's got just this incredible shape. It's just so gorgeous. That's what you want. That hard crust that's just delicious. And you can even smell it. It has an incredible aroma. But right now we're not going to cut it open. So this hard crust actually seals in all that moisture. So we're just going to let it rest on the counter for, I would say, a good hour to 2 hours. You really want to let this kind of cool off naturally and not let all that moisture that's inside escape. You also don't want to cover it either, because that'll just make the outside soggy. But I'll lean it up against something so there's more surface area exposed. You'll keep that really hard crust on the outside, but it'll be nice and soft, and that beautiful yellow bread on the inside will be nice and moist and soft and delicious. And we'll cut it open in about an hour or two. All right, this bread has rested now for a couple of hours, and now it's nice and cool and it's ready to be cut open. I actually cut one a little earlier. I couldn't wait. I just want you to hear this crunch. It's incredible. Wow, it's beautiful. Be careful, use a good serrated knife and watch your fingers, but you can see, you just get that beautiful golden color of that durum flour. If you can't find finely ground durum, I would look for online, maybe semola ramacinata, I think it's called. Or, like I said, you can mix half semolina, half bread flour, but really, you want to use all durum to get that beautiful golden color. And it just has this amazing aroma, incredible kind of almost sweet, nutty, earthy flavor to it. Delicious, delicious. That nice hard crust and the soft inside. And so this is just, if there's ever a bread you dip into a nice hearty tomato sauce, this is it. I mean, especially to soften up that crust on the outside, just dip it into a tomato sauce, a ragu. What they do in Naples, actually, they probably wouldn't do it with Pane di Matera because it's from Matera, but in Naples, they'll take, you know, a loaf of bread, kind of dig out the inside with their finger of the actual bread and just leave the crust. So it's, you know, a cave of bread then that they fill with Neapolitan ragu napolitano, which is a very meat heavy ragu with sausages and meatballs and brajol and tons of meats and tomato sauce. And they just fill the hollowed out bread with that ragu and then just eat it like a sandwich almost. And it's bread similar to this, crunchy outside. You can make sandwiches out of this, you know, little mortadella, little gabagool, put some gabagool on here, you know. Anyway, again, the flavor, the texture, the smell, everything about it is just amazing. You know, go ahead, try it out, you know. It's not that difficult to do in your own home oven. And traditionally in Matera, they'll make them in these big wood-fired ovens, so you get that kind of smoky wood-fired flavor to it. But this is just still amazing, just made in your home oven. Throw it in a sauce, make a sandwich, whatever you want to do. It's just the perfect Southern Italian, country, rustic sourdough bread. There you go. Have a good time. Might be 4 years until my next video. Who knows?